Okay, welcome everyone to a LinkedIn Live event on the topic of lean and agile procurement, the key to scaling agile across the company. Sorry we're joining you a few minutes late. We just got rid of some technical difficulties and we are ready to dive into this topic. My name is Monica Georgiev. I am the training and delivery lead for the EMEA region at AgileSherpas, and I'll be hosting today's interview with one of the most recognized thought leaders on Lean Agile Procurement and the president of the Lean Agile Procurement Alliance, Mirko Kleiner. I'm so excited to have you here today, Mirko, for our first LinkedIn Live of 2024.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'll do a quick. No, it's okay. I was going to do a whole spiel about everything that I know about you because we met, I think, a couple years ago at the Agile Turkey Summit. I got a chance to see you this year at the same event, or last year in the same event as well. And I was going to talk about your consultancy Flow Days that has given you a great opportunity to work with so many procurement departments and other business departments within organizations all over the world across so many industries. And I just finished your book on Lean Agile Procurement, How to Get Twice the Value in Half the Time. There it is. And everyone here today is going to be getting a promo code for it too. So lucky everyone. So there's a lot in your history around this topic and you're venturing into business agility now. So this LinkedIn Live was really to create that connection between procurement and greater business agility out there, which is something AgileSherpas is also really interested in. So as we kick off this first live virtual event for 2024, we sort of decided to focus our whole event on the prospect of scaling agility organizationally and exploring why procurement really should be the next department to join the Agile party, so to speak, so that the organizational transformation can be more sustainable as a result. So that was my spiel. I think we've arrived at the right place. We're at the right time. And I think we're certainly talking to the right person to answer some of our questions on procurement's role in greater business agility. So Mirko Kleiner, welcome. Thank you so much for joining today.
It's my big pleasure and nice meeting you again after all the years and last year's chat. And yeah, I'm super excited to be here and to share some of our experience to your audience, your members. And let's have a chat.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Did I miss anything in your far-reaching resume of experience? Because you've been in Lean and Agile Procurement for how many years now?
Oh my goodness.
I don't want to date you.
In Agile, I started at the beginning of 2000 something, the early 2000s, exploring Scrum, Agile and so forth. And back then it was for my own software company, and we applied everything to our own organization and did all the mistakes that you can imagine. And already back then, being a software supplier, we recognized that it brought so many value to us in our ways of working, but as soon as it came into the collaboration, into the sales pitch, into contracting with our clients, it was very difficult because there was not just procurement, but the whole process in our way that we could set up for success. So that's a little bit the history where I'm coming from. And so as we then founded, I was one of the co-founders of Flow Days, the Agile consultancy you mentioned in Switzerland, Germany. And back then we wanted to focus the business agility from the start, so not just software, IT, services. And during that journey, we looked at, where are some black holes, some areas in the organizations where agility hasn't took off, and I reminded myself that we applied it to sales and to our contracts, but I decided we need to change the whole system on the buyer side, to make everything much more smooth. And that's now 7 years back. I don't know why I ended up in procurement. Nobody knows. But we are currently disrupting not just procurement. We can talk about that later. Whole supply chain and things. Thinking procurement, thinking business agility, not just, you mentioned scaling within the organization, but even across organizations, because none or very, very few organizations are just for themselves, like on an island. Everybody is depending in one way or the other on their suppliers, partners, and sometimes even collaborating with their competitors.
And procurement is sort of like the gateway. Yeah, and procurement is sort of like the gateway to all of these different services and partners and suppliers. And if that part of the process is not agile or doesn't operate in a modern way, you get, a huge bottleneck that you need to figure out. Has that been what you've observed in these more traditional organizations where procurement was not an agile shop when you encountered it?
Well, to be fair, majority of the organizations today have not yet applied agile ways of working, agile mindset, agile values and principles to their, other functions, commercial functions, not just procurement. And so, yes, it's as you said, it could become a huge bottleneck. And if I mention public sector, everybody is like, oh yeah, of course, public tenders, pain in the ass, huge overhead. But sometimes the bigger corporations, they operate in a similar way. And so it's no exception that if it comes to complex projects, where the scope is not really defined or we have uncertainty, that the whole approach of traditional procurement is just the wrong tool, right, at hand. And so we have experienced, that's a story from the public sector, where they have lead times just for the procurement of 8 years. It's ridiculous.
What?
If you think about it. If you specify something and then you sign a contract 8 years later, you basically source old stuff, right, or old ideas. So, and in our days, even if it takes 6 months, the world has changed. So speed became one of the accelerators for our movement.
Yeah. And was it you mentioned the difference between the public sector and the private sector, and maybe it's well known that in the public sector, these sorts of bids and the procurement process is notoriously long. I didn't know it was 8 years. That sounds crazy. Especially because what are you getting? What are you getting at the end 8 years later? But is there a difference in the adoption of Agile across public sector versus private sector? Which one has been more receptive, let's say, in your experience?
It depends. Obviously, in the private sector, especially if you think of innovative companies, disruptive companies, they have embraced it maybe from the start. They never had set up an extra silo for procurement, while I'm currently, for example, supporting Canadian government, which is undertaking whole shared services. This is more than 100,000 people, an agile transformation, and procurement is a core part of that. So it's not that public sector is lagging and private sector is ahead. It really depends on the industry, on the region. So that there are some front runners as always and some laggards.
Yeah, I'm sure. So what do you think matters most to the success of an organizational agile transformation? You mentioned that it's not just about procurement, it's about all the departments coming together and even organizations learning from each other. If you had to call out maybe your top 3 things about what matters the most to the success of an organizational agile transformation generally, what would you call out? You've seen a lot of things. I can't wait to hear.
Yeah, I gave a similar answer on the World Agility Forum on the panel. You know, everybody was so excited about business agility frameworks, ways of working, and so on. This is all the how, right? And the question to me is more about the why. So why and where, you know, do we have a problem, you know, not just in the ways of working, but do we have a problem to solve? So focusing on the value creation from the start, and then, you know, do your agile adoption around that, with that in the center of your gravity. And then, of course, to make that work, you know, you need the leadership support, and but not in a sense that the leaders come in and tell you what to do, but that you get an empowered transformation, adoption, whatever practice that drives the change, and also supports the organization or organizations. So one of the questions we started to ask is, if we got pulled into an agile adoption, is you know, who of your strategic partners, you know, we need to incorporate in that change, because business agility doesn't stop at the company front door, and maybe it used to be the same thing with lean, right? If you're lean, or if we are agile, but our supply chain isn't, we are still in
A traditional org, yeah.
Yeah.
No. There's some questions coming in. I just wanted to call out that we are going to do a quick Q&A at the end of our 60-minute slot together, so hold those thoughts. We've budgeted enough time, I think, to make sure to get to all those questions, and we'll put them front and center when we do. But I've still got a few more questions of my own. I wanted to go back again to procurement, because I had just finished the book, so I'm super excited about it, and I have tons of questions. And in that book, you make a case that procurement departments have a lot to gain from agile practices. So I wanted to understand, because again, you're saying procurement is the gateway. You're saying it's sort of the front door of your organization, if you will, and a lot of that stems from, you know, that beginning, that frontier. So I just wanted to understand what procurement in isolation has to gain from adopting Agile. So I can tell that there's a lot of nice ripple effects that happen to the rest of the business areas or the organizational teams that are adjacent to procurement. But what does procurement stand to gain from Agile practices if they were just thinking of themselves, if you will?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, you know, we touched a little bit on it, the tools and the ways of working that procurement but other commercial functions have applied. Now, majority of them are 150 years old, right? Like it used to be in software and so forth. So they are no more fit for purpose for this complex, ever-changing world, and demanding, and the need for speed. You know, we talked about the lead times, right? Like sourcing a bit more complex software service and so on, like an ERP system, can easily take 6 to 12 months just in procurement. Now, why is that? We treat the problem in a transactional nature. Like the business has a problem, they articulate, you know, they specify it, they throw it over the fence and tell procurement, this is what we want, please source it for us. And this transactional nature does not work anymore. I mean, we are very used to that. You know, the answer is working cross-functional, right? It's how we do it in software 20 years almost now. Now we have applied with Lean-Agile Procurement something similar and took it to the next level. And so just to stay with the example of the ERP system, we got famous for that success story. We have achieved sourcing a new ERP system in just 2 days. Right, and how is that possible? Well,
compared to 8 years, yes.
Not 8 years. I mean,
6
the
to 12
benchmark
months.
for an ERP system is maybe between 6 to 12 months lead time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what we have done is we have set up a cross-functional team led by finance, because that they have been the business owner, and we added everybody to this cross-functional team, including procurement. So from the start, that's not usually the case. But IT, accounting, compliance, whoever is needed, right? But the secret sauce is usually you then come up with some potential solution providers, solutions, that's called a short list, so 2-3 potential partners. And instead of having just sending back and forth documents, we invite them, everybody at the same time in one room, and to co-create, not just get an alignment what we want, but even to co-create their proposals and improve a draft of an agile contract. Now back to your question. What can gain procurement? Well, speed, right? It's as simple as that. Everybody wants, if they get called, the business wants it yesterday, and they lack the tools they need to deal with this ever-changing complex world. We have them. Second is that they struggle, with, as any other function, like they have a lack of focus, they have a lack of alignment. So if we go away from just the sourcing as a process that we have improved, it's also the ways of working, the ways they are organized. Could become more. We can apply Kanban boards to have transparency on a portfolio level, and so forth, right? And then last but not least, the current mindset in a lot of procurement organizations is very much focused on costs, right? That's how they have been incentivized, because savings, on the other hand, they have been incentivized for achieving savings. Now the purpose of procurement has changed. If you think about speed, business impact, it's even environmental impact. So for example, Apple, they have a huge marketing show that they have reduced carbon emissions and so on, not just within Apple, but along the supply chain, right? And that is, as you said, if procurement is at the front door to their partners, it's also their tasks. So procurement gets more and more tasks on top of their plate, and with this more cross-functional, more agile ways of working, we give them also ideas how to deal with that in a more effective way than they do it today.
Yeah, it's really amazing how much one department can influence others, especially when they're part of cross-functional teams that include representatives from sales, marketing, maybe different partners that they work with. Once they get embedded in that sort of configuration, there's a lot of influence that they can have beyond what they might have had in the past. So I think that's also good for procurement's morale, right? To not just be the front door, but also be a key player in conversations about how do we solve certain problems within the organization? Do we source tools? Do we need suppliers, et cetera? So I can imagine being on the procurement side and having that sort of power much different than what might have been in the past, where you're sort of more of an order taker, right? Go source this for me, or doesn't really allow for a lot of creative problem solving and partnership with other functions in the organization.
I think that you just nailed it. When the problems become more complex, the answer is diversity. Diverse experiences, diverse capabilities, and so I have constant conversations with chief procurement officers and leaders in procurement organizations And the traditional approach to increasing complexity is creating another team, for example, for ESG, sustainability, and so on. So next time they have a project, they have more, complicated organization to synchronize, etc. So instead of, trying to know everything as an organization, we tell them, focus on what you're good at, and that's procurement, right? That's partner management, that's partner development, that's the contracting, and so forth and so forth. And if there is a new topic like AI currently, let's pull in an AI expert into the team. And this guy or this team of teams whatsoever is responsible for that. And you have a seat at the table from the start and could contribute from a procurement perspective. So instead of the team is doing a desk research or who might be a good partner, procurement might already have a list of preferred suppliers that are partners already, right? And then one more comment is, people in the audience maybe don't know, but if a company is struggling commercially, I didn't know that for many, many years, then the commercial functions, so sales, account management, but also procurement, they are in general responsible for up to 80% of the revenue. So if you want to have a direct impact on the commercial success of a company, of an organization, then you should start improving their ways of working in the commercial area, because you have a direct impact to the revenues.
Yeah, that's a lot of weight indeed, right? So I think that's a good segue into sort of my next question around, all right, there's a lot for these procurement departments to gain, not just for them, but for the rest of the organization. There's a lot of pressure for greater speed, greater efficacy. What are the biggest challenges that are standing in the way of a procurement department that's decided, let's do it, let's go agile, we're in it for the long haul? What is preventing them from getting to that ultimate agility, if anything? What are their challenges?
Well, I think it's as in every other function, first of all, they need to understand what are the possibilities and benefits. So there is kind of a culture of fear. If you think about, I recently had a conversation in the public sector, and we nailed it down to the culture of fear. If we do it wrong, and not just the sourcing, but then the project, it will always fall back to us, right? And I'm involved in multi-billion-dollar investments, a new biofuel plant, new trains, new defense, right? So we're not talking about peanuts here. So if the trains are shit, then everybody will point back, and you have bad press, and maybe some important leaders will lose their jobs. So there is a culture of fear, and we need to explain them, what the benefits are of agile ways of working, that we not just gain speed, but we could become more effective and minimize risk at the same time, right? And for example, I mentioned the example of sourcing an ERP system. We were sprinting for 5 weeks. That was the preparation, and then finally the 2 days with the shortlisted vendors. And that was 5 decision points, sprint reviews, where the buyer side, the leaders, could pull the trigger and say, yeah, you gathered those information, you prepared this, we like that, we don't like this. And we also teach the procurement folks, that we say, look, sometimes we are at the border to uncertainty. So maybe we just have 10% unknowns that could kill the whole project, the whole partnership. And maybe after a few sprints, we have uncovered all the unknowns or the important ones. So we could always fall back to a traditional approach, but gaining speed still. So culture, this culture of fear, education, I think. And then, as I said, you know, generally speaking, you need a leader. We usually assess the sponsor of such a pilot case. And if we think this person will not back up the team for this pilot, we don't start. We simply don't start.
I mean, especially if there's that culture of fear, you need somebody who's in a position of leadership to be able to protect that group of people who are going to be experimenting with new practices
Exactly.
from the pushback they might get from other parts of the organization or their partners, etc. I can imagine it's a difficult position to be in, to say, you know, we're not afraid to test this out, but we need that sort of buffer in the face of a leader who's willing to be that.
Yeah, and I mentioned assessing the leaders. I mean, we have conversations. It's not really an assessment, but we also give them a safety net, right? So in those areas, especially in the public sector or highly regulated area like energy or pharma or banking, you have a lot of compliance and rules and regulations. So with our approach, we are compliant. So we are not changing the approach because the procurement person that joins the team is still responsible to be compliant. And so is the IT guy, and so is the legal guy, etc. Right? So that's the beauty of working cross-functional. We are always compliant, and the other aspect of the safety net is that we can fall back to a traditional approach at any time. That doesn't count for changing the whole organization, of course, right? So we are supporting smaller and bigger organizations all over the world that are in a transformation in the procurement organization themselves. And it's not just introducing Scrum and Kanban, right? It's really, so for example, with a huge pharmaceutical company that have more than 800 people in procurement, they have recently changed the strategy for them, and so they are currently changing their procurement department into an enablement and capability organization.
I like that new name.
The purpose of that is no more a receiver being a receiver for an order, buy me that. All this, you know, trivial commodity buying stuff, they are currently digitalizing anyway. But instead, they will go out to the business and be part of the business of the delivery and do it together with them. Cross-functional in the first place, with the end, the vision is that let's imagine the organization is agile already with the business and everything, then we end up in something like team of teams, right? Organized around value creation, product, services, you name it. And then all of these entities need to have the capability how to evaluate, how to manage, how to deal with third party. So it's no more a centralized capability. It still could be, you know, some enablement, some experts. But if you think about it, 20 years ago, we had quality assurance departments. They're gone, right? Same thing. Quality became a capability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, how some of the language has changed to enable some new values and maybe new mindsets to really take root in some of these modernizing, digitalizing organizations. We've seen it in marketing too. You know that AgileSherpas, one of our main focuses is obviously on agile marketing and how that affects the rest of the business and other business units and their own agility. And in marketing, I think the term marketing isn't used as often to describe whole departments. It's now more of like the stewards of customer experience, the shepherds of customer excellence. So it's all about that customer centricity and enabling and supporting customers to achieve their own goals and in turn have that benefit the organization. So interesting about the pharmaceutical organization that's shifting the language around procurement, because procuring is like a one-off, you just procure something. But here you're someone who is building capabilities, you're enabling, you're consolidating, you have a very different role. And even just the language around that, I think is shifting responsibility in a really beautiful way, because it gives us, us marketers and us procurement folk, a much more influence over the organization generally. I was thinking about a recent sort of crisis in the supply chain world, and I'm not deep in that world, but I'm relatively aware of what's going on. And I'm thinking, of course, of the pandemic, right, where there was a lot of issues with supply chain. Being able to source certain materials became impossible, et cetera. I'm wondering, how did that affect procurement's adoption of agility and these new practices? Did they become more hesitant to adopt them, or was there a greater urgency to adopt them now that they saw how much their world could be rattled by something like this?
Yeah, that's a good, very good observation. We got a huge booster by the pandemic and related supply chain disruptions. Because the leadership, not just in procurement, but in the business, now they know that they are not on an island, that their business is directly dependent on their tier 1, tier 2, whatsoever suppliers. The difficulty is that if you think about it, if you have no clue that there are new tools out there, and that was the situation in procurement, and in many ways it still is. They were just forced to work day and night to make the impossible possible. So a lot of organizations that we also coached and still coach, they had massive problems with burnouts of their employees. Because, as I said, the root cause is if you have the wrong tool at hand, it's still the wrong tool. You can apply it faster and work 20 hours a day, but still the wrong tool. And so I think we still need to invest a lot of, all of us in the Agile community to increase the awareness that there are new ways of working, new principles, and so on that bring a lot of benefits. Where this all could lead to is, I'm involved in the meanwhile in huge projects. Some of them are in the innovation space, where a corporation has a new crazy idea, a new business case, but they need 3, 4, even more partners. And traditionally, you would have set up a supply chain, one after the other, right? One partner after the other. And that takes a lot of time, a lot of investment, a lot of money. And we have taken a similar approach, like in Lean-Agile Procurement, that we bring all of the potential players at the table from the beginning and setting up, we call that an adaptive partner ecosystem. Now, there are organizations out there, they even go 10 steps ahead, and instead of I'm the innovator, I'm the buyer kind of, or the client, and you just need to deliver whatever I need to ship my new innovation, my new product, they set up mutual contracts across all the parties, and so that all the partners co-invest and then obviously also share the wealth more evenly. Because if you think about it, in a supply chain, it's often the last in the chain that wins it all. If you think about Apple and the big ones, right? and nobody knows what, you know, the small SMEs in China and so on, what they make. So I think there is a huge potential to even, you know, applying agile ways of working, but also the mindset, you know, treating everybody fair and on the same eye level. There's a huge potential to even, come up with a new kind of economy, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sort of relates to the topic that we've been circling around, and the topic that we're focusing this event on. It's the role of Lean and Agile procurement to be the turnkey, or the key, if you will, to overall organizational business agility. And I wanted to ask you whether you had seen some, you know, very clear examples of a procurement department deciding to go agile and having that influence the rest of the business behind them to get on that agile bandwagon along with procurement. Because obviously, right, that's a big undertaking. And I wonder if you had ever seen procurement be the leader in such a transformation that's happening at scale ultimately.
We have had several cases in the past, and it brings me back to one of my initial answers, or one of your initial questions. You know, if there is a problem, you know, let's try to solve the problem. And we obviously get called if there is a problem in procurement. So such a strategic sourcing case, like sourcing new trains, $1 billion investment, and the current lead time is 8 years, and it's ridiculous. And so if you then, you know, we then teach the people, you know, how we could do it, approach it differently, and then if they are, let's say, convinced to a certain level to take the next step, we often then run a pilot case, the first phase of the sourcing whatsoever. And if you are successful, and it can't get worse, right? We are always successful. Then this is an inspiration for the whole organization. So it's really a true story that we have initialized a few agile transformations out of procurement, where the finance department, procurement department was first. And the beauty is procurement, as I said, it's very important department because it's responsible for so much revenue. It's a strategic role, right? So we are already on the C-suite, even with a pilot case. So it resonates on the top level in the organization. Traditionally, if I think back 10, 15 years, you know, agile transformations, we needed to make our way up. You know, there was a crazy guy in delivery, a project manager, or IT delivery manager who heard about agile, and then we hit the glass roof, right, once in a while, and the whole transformation stopped. So there's, I mean, obviously the times have changed, and today's leaders know more about it. But still, this is also kind of another opportunity to, especially for all consultancies out there, to approach clients in a different way.
And is there something you would recommend for a successful agile implementation in the procurement department to do in order to act as an ambassador across the organization? Like, should they document their impact story in some way, collect data? How should they socialize that within the organization? Do they need to get the leaders to talk to each other? What have you seen work?
All of that. You know, if we run such a pilot case, and it could be a multi-billion-dollar investment, then we have sprint reviews, right? And everybody that is interested could show up, right? That's already part of the internal marketing. And of course, we organize safaris, we visit other customers, and so forth. Yeah, sometimes the most obvious thing, you know, gets forgotten. Write a case, write a blog post, go in such podcasts and talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great, because I think there is some sort of responsibility too for people who have been successful and have achieved the impact that they were hoping to achieve with these practices, to go out and sort of be an evangelist for it. Because I think one of the most searched for terms is Agile case studies. Like in the Agile world, people are looking for case studies so that they can sort of replicate or even just take some learnings from and takeaways from, so that they're not starting from scratch on their own journey. So I think it does make sense for these procurement departments to document their learnings. And I think that's why IT is seen as such an ambassador for Agile, because they ended up documenting so much of what they learned from applying this new way of work. And that's why they became the ultimate ambassadors of Agile. And everybody else was able to follow and amend or tweak for their own context. But still, they weren't starting from the ground up. They were starting with some sort of set of takeaways or set of learnings to go off of. I think that's very valuable.
Maybe one more comment. I do a lot of inspiring sessions on the C-level in the meanwhile, obviously, and I always ask, can you please also invite the Agile practice?
And so when you say Agile practice, who are you referring to?
The internal Agile practice. So short story here. I recently was in Australia with one of the biggest insurance, and the CPO, the Chief Procurement Officer, and his team wanted to get inspired by me and say, yeah, I'll come, but make sure that some senior Agile coaches of your internal senior Agile coaches will be there too, because they know already 70-80% what I know. And it was the very first time that they saw each other. And after 20 minutes, the CPO said, I got it. What are we waiting for? And he approved the first pilot. So
and do you think is it that connection people, I was going to ask?
Yeah, connecting the people, and sometimes across industries, leaders with leaders. But sometimes it's so close, just internals with each other.
Yeah, you were sort of the mechanism through which they connected, even though they were so close in the same organization. Yeah. And it's nice to sort of have Agile validated by others who know it well. So it's somehow like, oh, we have this capability internally. These coaches can support whatever is going to get rolled out. It's not just me alone if I support this. So I think that sort of community is really, really important to have as well. Well, I see there's a lot of questions that we'll get to in just a moment, but I think this will all be relevant for anyone who's on the call. My final question, what would you say to someone who wants to scale Agile within their procurement department, but they're just a member of a team? Where do they start? What reading would you recommend? What resources, if there's someone who's really keen, but they're on the team level and they want to make their department an Agile procurement department? What are the steps they need to take? Where do they begin?
Well, of course, we have published a lot of materials on our website, lap-alliance.org. And one of the papers that we published, I think 2 years ago, is kind of some inspirational guide for leaders or such people that want to change something. And it describes the evolution of procurement based on examples. And so that's the message with that paper was, if you have implemented, for example, Scrum or any scaling approach within procurement, you won't be done. It's just the beginning, because the overall term is something like from function to capability. We need to get over the transactional nature of a supporting department, right? And we need to distribute the capabilities throughout the organization. Then we offer, of course, also trainings. There you mentioned the book, might be also a reference. But even simpler than that, folks in procurement, they have just the exact same problems that we had in IT and software, marketing.
And marketing, I was going to say. Yeah.
Yeah, lack of transparency, lack of alignment. Start at the very small things. Especially you mentioned a team member who has maybe not the authority to change the structure or a policy or something. Make your work transparent, right, within your team. Start small, and then others might get inspired by that, and you could create a malicious of kind of a agile practice or something.
Yeah, people will be drawn to you naturally.
Yeah, exactly.
I just thought of one. I don't mean to steal the spotlight here from our questions in the chat, but I did want to ask one more question because it was related to our collection of sort of case studies in procurement, socializing that within the organization, being ambassadors of business agility generally. What metrics should a procurement department that's going through an agile transformation be tracking? You mentioned lead time. Is there anything else so that they can prove their pilot's success? Apart from lead time, is there any other metric that we should be aware of?
Well, that's very different depending on the culture, and the context of the companies. But I would lead time is a good starting point. So, for example, we recommended a public agency to put a policy that every strategic sourcing case should be done from idea till contract signed within 6 months, which is a huge ambition for them. And then the people will figure out how, right? And maybe they will find out that there are some agile ways of working and principles and so on. So lead time, definitely. But also satisfaction, right? Internal satisfaction of internal people, business satisfaction, customer or user satisfaction, but also employee, the partners, the vendor satisfaction. Nobody takes care of that, right? So if we start to treat our vendors more like partners, there should be a development in the satisfaction, right? For example. And then obviously there are commercial metrics we can look at, but then things become really complicated.
And there's a lot of parties involved.
Side. Yeah, not just the savings, of course, but also what's the impact of what we are doing if we are getting faster. It's more like metrics that we know from Lean Startup, like the lagging indicators on customer retention, customer satisfaction, and what's about the revenue and so on and so on.
Yeah, and those are more important. I mean, if you're able to influence those types of lagging indicators, or leading indicators, excuse me, you'll be able to influence the lagging indicators like ROI and all of those commercial metrics as well. So I think there's a strong belief and a strong connection between customer or partner and supplier satisfaction and the bottom line in the end.
Yeah.
So I totally agree, putting the focus on those leading indicators to prove your pilot. All right, so we're 6 minutes out. There's a couple of questions. The first one is maybe something we touched on a little bit. It's from Ramya in the chat. Thank you, Ramya, for this question. It's almost like asking what's the meaning of life. What does it take to bring Lean Agile Procurement to an organization? Mirko, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, 1 hour inspiring session, or read the book, read our website, get inspired yourself, and then just do it. Lead by example. You don't have to be as crazy as we are, putting all the shortlisted vendors in one room, but you could start small. So it's not rocket science, it's very much common sense what we do. But for a lot of people that have been, I mean, nobody is 150 years old, but you know, the culture and the application of the processes, the policies are based on a knowledge of 150 years old practices, and that's the challenge, right? So blame the process and not the people.
You seem to be pretty adamant about that, Mirko. Getting the right people in the same room together seems to be, you know, one of those tipping points. If you're able to do that, maybe not as an official cross-functional team yet, but maybe even just introducing them to each other so that they can hear each other out. Have you seen that work really well at the outset to change the mindset of everyone, having them meet with the people who are actually involved instead of treating each other as these separate, you know, pieces of a process when in fact they're all one?
Yeah. So, you know, I think everybody would agree that, you know, even an organization with multiple silos and functions have different multicultural and beliefs and values. So the first problem that we need to overcome is that we get a common ground, right, of this cross-functional team. And then that could be done in a few meetings, right? That doesn't take 6 months. And then it's, you know, we usually ask, you know, in such a pilot, you know, is there a favorite, you know, a favorite solution, a favorite vendor, whatsoever. And so maybe we don't need to do procurement. So that's you know, why we have to do it at all, right? So that's a very powerful question. And if there is, for example, a preferred supplier, a partner that we are already connected with, let's just meet. It could be as simple as that. And as important that it is, you know, to have the right people internally, so not just the leaders, but really the people from the ground that will be involved in delivery. It's as important to have those kind of people, the experts from the vendors, and connecting them, right? Because one thing that we need to make sure is the business fit, which is, you know, will their service product solve our problems, and can we afford it, and is it within time and budget? But the other thing that we brought in, and procurement never thought about it, is the human and culture fit. Are these the right people? Do we like each other? And in our you know, event, we call it Big Room, where we have multiple vendors simultaneously at the same time. It sometimes, very rarely, happens that we send some of the vendors home after the first hour because we don't like each other. Right? So why we should waste our and their time?
Yeah, that's very powerful. Getting everyone in the same room can eliminate a lot of the legwork that maybe happens after and delays the process. So love that. Thank you, Ramya, for your question. There's another question here from Aisha. Aisha is asking, how should you best align procurement sprint activities that are dependencies for another cross-functional team like IT or engineering?
So the emphasis is on dependencies, right? And there are obviously several possibilities and ways how to remove a dependency, but we have made the most easiest solution is that if IT, in this case IT would be the client, the internal client for procurement, you know, that procurement, if that's the highest priority now, that procurement is getting embedded into IT in that particular team for a certain period. Could be a few hours, could be a few days, could be a few weeks, depending on the complexity of the case. And because the main struggle for procurement is usually you have too less, not too many, the opposite, to less of them, like lawyers, right? Same thing, like software architects, same thing. So we need to help procurement to prioritize, and currently working with Scaled Agile, how we can incorporate our work into the PI cycles. Same story, right? So we need to align on priorities first, and then go into that. So that's the most easy one, that we have a joint priority, but the problem starts there, right? Often that's not the case. We don't have a company portfolio, a company priority. And so even if we just start a small little pilot and it's super urgent, and we know exactly which capabilities and people we need in this cross-functional team, those people are often busy with other tasks. And the procurement priority is not the business priority or not the IT priority. So it could be both, the dependency could be both ways. And so this leads immediately to a portfolio question. And if the dependency is urgent but not a priority, we do it later. We don't waste our time with it, right? And sometimes, hopefully it's both, and if we can agree that it's urgent and a priority, then we put all our focus to it to resolve the dependency. The other answer is, on a mid to long term, we need to transform the way procurement works, right? If it's still a service, then it will be always a dependency. So the only solution to that is that procurement starts to enable, in this case, IT or engineering. An enablement could be that they get a budget. It could be that they get access to the catalog so that they can order whatever they need themselves. So digitalization of procurement. And what we are doing in particular is enabling those teams to stay with this question in IT or engineering, to enable IT and engineering in the more strategic and complex sourcing, so that they, maybe in the first sourcing or procurement activities, they have active support, and the next time they can do it themselves, and procurement is just in the second or third line for any cases.
There's also there's also some great ideas from some other of our participants today, our attendees, in the chat surrounding that question. So take a look. You've got great input from Mirko, wonderful input from others as well. But unfortunately, I'm going to have to cut us off because we are at our time today, and we started a little bit late, so we're ending a little bit late for symmetry. But I just wanted to thank everybody for joining. If you have officially RSVP'd for the event, we will be following up. I love the visualization. We'll be following up with some additional resources on the topic of Lean and Agile procurement shortly over email. This will include a promo code for 50% off of a PDF version of Mirko Kleiner's book on our central topic for today. So thank you so much for that, Mirko. I'll be sending that over email so people can crop it or they can grab it from your slide. Also, the recording of this event is going to be live on the event link. So if you RSVP'd, you're going to get a notification from LinkedIn all in one place, so you can always take a look and rewatch. I want to sincerely thank our guest and all of you for joining today for our first virtual live event of the year right here on LinkedIn. See you next time. Can't wait.